You can have really intrusive thoughts. A lot of folks that I've talked to in this presentation have said like there's parts of town that they don't go to because it's so overwhelming from what they've heard from their clients or the fear of running into their clients in that neighborhood. Okay. And I should say, I'm like, any thoughts so far? Any questions before I go on? Let's see. All right. So here's your first thoughts prompt. And I should say, if you can do this on your phone, if you've got some, if you don't have it already, grab some paper and a pen. I'm going to be asking tons of questions. But the first thing to think about as we go through this is, what do you gain from the work? There's a lot of amazing things about this work. And what are the drawbacks of this work? So take a minute, write those thoughts down, and then maybe I'll do a fishbowl with one person and we can do a little conversation about that. So just take a minute and write those thoughts down. All right. So unless someone volunteers, I'm going to call on somebody I know. I think Amber knows that I'm talking about her. Amber, can I do a little convo with you? Will you be my test person? We can talk. So Amber's coming off mute. Can you unmute yourself? You have to go somewhere where you can talk, where there's not screaming children in the background. And they didn't give you any warning, and you're like, this is classic Rebecca. Then she puts me on the spot. So Amber and I met a million years ago. All right.
Amber, you need to unmute.
Okay.
2006.
Okay. A million, almost 20 years ago.
Wow. Oh my God.
A lifetime ago.
Yeah.
My kiddo was 2 when we met. My kiddo's 20.
Wow. I remember him running around at Antioch one day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So for you, what do you gain from this work? What happens for you when you do this work?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I definitely gain a sense of like helping people. I love meeting people. I love creating art with people or watching them create art. What else did I write down? And since being in private practice, it's, there's a whole nother component of like working for myself and having a sense of like being able to have some freedom in my work. But yeah, I think overall it's just a sense of like, doing something good in the world, and that's fulfilling and that helps shift. I see people and kids, you know, I see all ages, so it's different. Like you were saying, like some days I get to play with kiddos and it's like I have so much joy in meeting a family and like helping them work through change and seeing progress. And then on the flip side, the drawback is for me, I think, especially after becoming a mom, just how much emotional energy it takes to be a therapist, and how some days I wish I could just go to work and do something monotonous and not have to turn on my thinking brain and my emotional sense of like all of the emotional energy that it takes is just like way too much some days.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we talk about it, are you feeling it at all in your body, or are you staying pretty much in your head?
I feel like I feel like a lot of yeah, I feel it like in my chest, kind of like where I would feel it like if I'm trying to be present with a client and show up for them and hold space for them and like create the container. And how I'm like, am I doing enough? Like you said, am I enough for them right now? I don't know. Like, I hope I am. And then being able to leave it like at work,
Right.
which is hard for me. I've
Yeah.
gotten better over the years, but that is definitely still hard.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was doing supervision early on, and I would say to people, if you're thinking about it when you get home, divide the not so much money you're making by the extra hours that you're carrying it at home, and then you're making that much less an hour. So,
Yeah.
you know, like if you can leave it there. And that's actually part of the feminist theory part of this, is that you know, your clients made it this far. Like, can you trust that, you know, you're going to be a guide to them, you're going to be present for them, and then you have to hand it back to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thank you, Amber.
You're welcome.
And if anybody wants to put in the chat for them what the benefits are of this working with the drawbacks are, you know, I kind of hope to normalize today that we're all here for a reason, and that for us, a lot of us, you know, the drawbacks are real. There's that fancy thing where you can do a survey on here. I'd love to do a survey of how many of you have thought about leaving the field in the last few years, because it's been so tough. During the election cycle of 2016, 1 in 2 Americans would have qualified for an anxiety diagnosis. I'm sure it's still the same today. You know, we're also in a crisis of loneliness too. Our clients have the least amount of social support. Even, you know, quote, high functioning clients, the average American now has 3 friends. In 1970, the average American had 7 friends that all lived in their same city. Now the average American has 3 friends. The chances are none of those friends live in the same city. So if you think about when a crisis happens, you know, like when someone needs a ride to a medical appointment, or this is actually why the mental health system gets so stressed, is that people don't have a support network, a basic support network. All right, so I love this. One of the benefits of this work that Joshua said is that it's interesting. It's always interesting and stimulating, right? Like I've never, you know, how often am I like, wow, that has never happened before for me. I am addressing this question for the first time, you know, or as everything shifts, like with social media, as awful as it is, you know, like learning to integrate that into my practice, or learning to sit with someone as they read through a text conversation and say like, and then they sent me angel emoji, blah, blah, blah emoji, blah, blah, blah emoji. And I'm like, like, and what does that mean to you? Because I don't know what you're saying to me. So, you know, it's never boring. Yeah, I love what Joy said. It's a good feeling to do what I do. There's purpose. And on the flip side, it's draining and time consuming. I mean, what Amber said, and I was alluding to, like, how on earth do you leave it at work, and how do we build that muscle over time? And we'll come up with tons of options today. Yeah, what Emily said, literally it's life and death. You're often, someone says, what did you do at work today? And I'm like, a client was suicidal and we worked through that. And for most of us, like, and I worked through that by myself with the client, and because I'm in private practice or because I'm working remotely or at home, I had no one to talk to about that. We've all lost our own support systems through the pandemic. All right. Next slide. Okay, so basic trauma in the brain. I didn't realize how lucky I was at the time, but I got to do my sensory motor psychotherapy training. The lead trainer was Dr. Janina Fisher. I'm going to type her name in the chat. If you don't know her, look her up. She's got tons of stuff on YouTube. She regularly presents with Pessy. I believe she's the greatest trauma trainer alive. She's also aging, so like go access her now. So if you're familiar with Bessel van der Kolk's work, I always say the song, it's either the body holds the score or the body keeps the score. His groundbreaking work on trauma and how the body responds and the brain responds to trauma. His training institute, he kind of ran the front of the house and was the public face of all of this. Janina actually trained everybody in the back of the house. And she's now going on to kind of have her own thing, and she's got a ton of great information about trauma training. So there's a way in which when we are experiencing trauma, our brains react. This is evolutionarily, this made sense. But now in the modern world, it gets us in a lot of trouble. So this fabulous illustration was created by me. So we've got the front of the brain, right? This like big lob that we've got up here that sets us apart from a lot of the animals on Earth. And it's capable of doing reason. Our neocortex is this amazing asset to ourselves. The problem is when we're in a traumatic situation, we lose access to this neocortex. We lose access to the ability to reason. This is also what happens to teenagers. If you're raising a teenager or if you're working with teenagers, you will notice this. They appear to have no ability to reason. And so my joke is always is that when we need this the most, we lose access to it. Watching my kid go from 12 to 20 and like seeing the kind of choices they can make now at 19 and 20 that at 15 were like, they literally didn't have access to that. So then we've got our kind of our animal brain and our reptilian brain, which is really just instincts, breathing and eating. But in our emotional brain, it goes into hyperdrive in a trauma response. So you've also got an overactive adrenal response, right? So you're like running on adrenaline, which made sense when, there was a large predator running after us. But now what happens in post-traumatic stress is that system is on override all the time. We're in that running on an adrenal response instead of having access to the neocortex. So we will learn some mindfulness exercises today to try and get our reasoning back online. And you saw me just do it with Amber when I asked her, how is your body feeling? That is a mindfulness-based trauma response question, which is instead of overloading her with content, because guess what? She doesn't have access. Not that sorry, Amber. The average person, when we just start talking about trauma, their reasoning skills will go what's called offline. And so when you ask questions like, hey, how does your body feel right now? That allows them to center and calm for a minute and then go back into a reasoning brain again. So this is a way to kind of get people back when they're off. Any questions on trauma in the brain? There's so much of this out there. And it's so great that we have access to it. And it's thanks to people like Bessel van der Kolk who began this conversation, because before that, we really didn't understand in a Western way. I think indigenous cultures all over the world understood, oh, something traumatic happened. We should gather together and tell the story. We should dance. We should write a song about this. Like, those are all how we've handled trauma throughout the ages, really. Okay, here is a quote by one of my favorite people who's passed on, the Native American poet and activist, John Trudell. He was one of the people to occupy Alcatraz Island in the 70s, beginning the modern American Indian movement. And it is believed that, well, he lost his wife and daughter in a fire. And after that happened, he began working as a spoken word artist and traveled the country and did all kinds of amazing activism. And he has many, many amazing quotes about how to live through life and the worst of what life has to offer us in a very complicated way. So one of my favorite quotes from him is, life does not give you anything you can't handle, but it's all in the handling. So many of our clients and us ourselves live very, very complicated lives that, looking from the outside, you would think, how could anybody live through this? But we all make it, or most of us, a lot of us do make it. A lot of us do stick with it. And it's really in, how do we handle it? How do we put the pieces together after something really awful happens? Here's some more statistics. These are old, and I keep meaning to look for vicarious trauma statistics connected post-pandemic. I'm sure the studies have been done. I just can't quite find the one that I want the most. But this is an old study, but I guarantee you the results would still be the same, if not higher today. This group interviewed community mental health workers, and they found that 54% had high emotional exhaustion. So if you're at an agency, that's half your coworkers are exhausted, probably more than half now. And 38% reported a high depersonalization rate, meaning they don't feel in their body, they're not in their support system. But along with that, most reported a high level of personal accomplishment as well. So we see that same issue that we were talking about earlier. It's this kind of both and experience. So if you're looking at, so Pat Ogden and Janina Fisher work very closely together, and this is, I'm going to put it in the chat. This is sensory motor psychotherapy. So there are 5 classic responses to trauma. In the US, we really learn about fight or flight, right? Something traumatic happens, you see people go into one of those 2 states. But there's also 3 others that are really present. And if you think about yourself and your coworkers, I bet there's someone has gone into one of these responses through the work as well. So there's also freeze, which could be like deer in the headlights, where you find that you want to act, but you just can't. There's also faint, which could just, for a lot of us, for me, it just looked like I just fell asleep. Like I just found that like I could fall asleep anywhere, anytime. And people are like, Becca, what's going on? And I'm just like, I don't know. I'm so tired. My brain is so fatigued that like I can just zone out at any time. And there's also cry, and that could be like being very, very tearful, but it could also be like cries for help that you find yourself just kind of, or a coworker of yours is just presenting as really young. Like they're kind of always kind of whiny or clingy or like asking for help in this way that feels kind of clawing and annoying. So I just find that if we reframe these 5 responses as really normal, that we can kind of begin to understand them as kind of someone's asking for help when they're so burnt out that they don't know how to ask for help. And maybe you could find it in your heart to give help, even if you find the response is something that you wouldn't do yourself. So this is really interesting. A friend of mine is creating this beautiful play that's based on a slave narrative from a woman, I believe at some point in the 1840s, this woman wrote this play, and it follows her from a child through being an adult. And the actor who is playing the child part played the child in a cry response to trauma, kind of clawingly sweet and very over emotional. And when I watched the play with my friend, I was like, oh, that's such an interesting, that response really hit me as wrong, but I realized it is an option. And both me and my friend were talking about like, we wouldn't give ourselves that chance. That would not be one of our trauma responses. We are both, I'm a fainter or a flighter, and she grew up in Philly, so she's just a fighter. So it's just interesting that you might see this response in someone else and be like, ugh, like that's not the right way to do it. But just if we can remember, these are all perfectly normal responses to trauma. All right, so there's another layer to this of why some people respond differently than others. So when it has a minus by it on the stat, that's things that make it better. Sometimes, with statistics, it's hard to understand what's going on. So the things that increase post-traumatic stress or vicarious trauma for clinicians would be the volume of trauma on your caseloads. I know for some of you, you can't control that. So, sometimes I would talk when I was training clinicians, like even if you can order your day with your clients, like, you're better having those traumatic, if you can. I know every day can be totally chaos, but like, does it make sense for you to have those traumatic cases early in the morning, or are you better with that in the afternoon? Or, do you need to make sure that you got to get up and take a break after you've seen those types of clients? But really knowing that the more trauma you have in your caseload, the more chances that you're going to experience vicarious trauma. Another thing that we can't control is our own personal trauma history. If you have a traumatic background yourself, you've got almost a 20% higher chance of having vicarious trauma. I had a really traumatic childhood. If you know what ACEs are, I have a really high ACE score. But I just have to know that about myself, and I have to build in lots of self-care time. I make tons of art. I go on lots of nature walks. If I volunteer, it's for the most like easygoing thing ever. There's certain types of people I can't hang out with. As we were coming on this call, people were talking about what they did last night, and someone said they watched a really scary movie and that was fun for them. I cannot watch a really scary movie. Like, that will send my nervous system through the window. Or I've learned now, like, I can't attend big Coliseum shows. Even though I miss that, my nervous system is just the way it is now. And, I really enjoy music, but this is silly, but I need to go to a really tiny venue. And just admitting these things about myself instead of seeing them as like personal failures is a big part of how I have to handle these two things. I have a really traumatic childhood and I do this work. So things that really increase our ability to handle vicarious trauma is work support, which, in the pandemic was just ridiculous. But this goes back to that story that I told about the Asian Counseling and Referral Service, which is, do you meet with your coworkers? Can you guys be kind and fun to each other? These are all things that are going to dramatically improve. Again, we're like almost at 20% how people handle vicarious trauma. And then the greatest thing that we can do at over 25% is social support. So back what I was talking about jobs that are acknowledged, the stress is really high as opposed to the jobs that we have. If we can tell the people in our community, hey, you need to notice and celebrate us. I might need a little extra support. I have the second highest stressful job in America. We really need that social support. And that can be all kinds of things in terms of where you find community. That also means as clinicians, we need to ask for social support, which can be really hard for a lot of us to do. We think we can handle this all on our own, or we're just burdening someone if we say, hey, can we just take a walk around the park and can we just talk about puppies or something? These are things that we really need in order to keep doing this work. And I always say when I do this presentation, if just the one thing that comes out of this is that people understand that our work is so stressful, and we begin to ask for the support that we need in order to continue doing this work, we are really shouldering the burden of our society of not giving enough money to this field. And it's those of us who work in the field that are really holding that. So if you want to put in the chat the ways you'd like to see your community support you, that would be a great thing to do. So a little bit more chronic stress, we actually know it shrinks this part of the brain. So if you've got clinicians that just don't seem like they've got all the reasoning skills that they should have, or if you yourself feel like you don't have all the reasoning skills that you should have, just know that chronic stress is actually impacting your brain. It impacts our ability to make decisions and to self-regulate. The cells actually overreact, and it causes mood fluctuations and poor executive functioning. So we're just all basically massive teenagers running around trying to be adults in the world. All right. So what's the group that has the highest rate of compassion fatigue are folks who work with perpetrators of sexual abuse. So just know that if you are doing that work, there's a reason that it's so hard. Statistically, it's the hardest work that's out there. All right, somebody wrote something and I want to make sure I read it. Yeah, we need to debrief after crises. I'm actually going to lead you guys through a protocol that if you can just start doing it with another friend, it's going to radically change. We used to have crisis debriefings, and it's just begun to disappear in the way that the community mental health works. All right. Is this a breakout slide? No, this isn't it. So one of the ways that I view this work is that it's my job as a clinician to stay on the boat. And what I mean by that is stay in my clinical framework, stay in the work. People ask me this all the time, like I'm 25 years into this career. How do I keep going? And as much as I hated being trained psychoanalytically in New York, it was a disaster for me in a lot of ways. It did teach me to have a very strong framework of what is my job, as opposed to what is everything the client is bringing into the session. What is my job to hold, actually? And then the other side of staying on the boat is that if you can see the client's kind of what the client trauma brings to you, if that's the water, What happens if I get off the boat and go into the water with the client? We both start to get dragged down, right? So it's my job to throw out a life ring, to throw out skills, supports, anything that I have. Also, at the same time, I got a great quote when I was teaching. Someone said, their supervisor said this to them: work half as hard as my client. If I'm working harder than my client is working, I'm definitely going to feel dragged down, right? It has to come from them at some point. Obviously, I don't know what all of your jobs are, but in the kind of work that I'm doing, even in community mental health, I had to work half as hard as the clients did. It is my job to stay on the boat and hold that clinical framework or hold that professional framework, whatever that means for you. And I, view the emotional turmoil of my clients as the water, and I just have to remind myself when I'm thinking, what should I do next? Am I staying in my clinical framework, or am I getting in the water with the client? And I always try and it's yeah, as much as I can, I'm trying to stay on that boat. Okay, so this is a amalgamation of many different things that I've heard. But I think it pretty much sums up what vicarious trauma looks like for most people. I'll just read it. I was working with homeless youth, many of whom had traumatic backgrounds, dual diagnosis, self-harming, and were often suicidal. For several months, I had low energy. I wasn't able to sleep well at night before I worked. I was avoiding seeing my friends. I always had an upset stomach, right? There's that somatic response, or a lot of people have chronic migraines in this work. A lot of people have back problems. I did enjoy the work. I think that's why it was so hard, that I was seeing myself so worn out, right? This is just kind of a classic presentation of what we see at work. So the history of this term is that it was actually created by nurses, the term vicarious trauma. And I thought this was really interesting, that for nurses, they're trained that things will ultimately have a positive outcome. If they do all the right things, the client will turn out fine. But what folks learn practicing in the field is that it's unrealistic and naive to believe that there will always be a positive outcome. And if we set up those types of goals for ourselves, we'll never meet them. And then also we might get mad at our clients for not having positive outcomes, but really that's unrealistic. And we just have to be able to put into place that, I always said this when I was training clinicians, some of your clients are going to get worse while you work with them. And it's your job to sit with that and help them just tolerate that. All right. This is going to be your first breakout group. And you're going to take a minute. So if you'll just make a list, either on your phone or on a piece of paper, you are going to be sharing in groups of 5 to 7 people. There are, I can't see how many people on the call. I think there was 50 the last time I checked. So I want you to think of traits of your professional identity, and then traits, as I was saying, like when you're in the water, when you're trying to be a rescuer, traits that occur then. So, and there could be crossover. Things could be the same. But we're going to start to try and suss out what's your professional identity and when are you overstepping that. And we all do it. No shame here. I totally do it. You should turn your camera on before you go into the breakout room, because sometimes some computers won't allow you to turn your camera on when you get into the breakout room. And I really encourage you to share. So we're just trying to divide this out, and it could be symbols, words, stories. It's up to you. What is your professional identity, and when do you feel like you've overstepped and you're in a rescuer mode? Okay, are we ready to do a breakout room? Should we do, Mary, 7 minutes, 10 minutes? What are you thinking?
You tell me how long you want it
Okay,
for.
let's do 10 minutes. That means everybody can share for about a minute. There's time for discussion. Also, really just, this isn't a time to fix anybody. Just really listen to each other. You don't need to fix anybody's problems. This is really a time for you guys to share. So you're gonna have 10 minutes in your breakout room. It's 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. And then we'll have a little discussion, and then we'll have a break. All right. Are we ready, Mary? And
We're ready.
I'm not going in a group, so you won't even hear from me. All right, ready? See you guys in 10 minutes.
Okay. Rebecca,
Yes.
you want to try and share your
Oh,
screen to the
okay.
breakout rooms?
All right. How does that work? You'll have to talk me through it.
So let me look. It might be in more, or it might be under, it might be breakout rooms on your menu at the bottom. Either it's under there or under more, and it will
Okay.
be enable the share to breakout rooms option.
Okay. Breakout rooms. Okay. Wording, captions, breakout rooms. I'm unassigned.
No, you don't want to, yeah, you don't want to join one. You just want to enable share to breakout rooms. It might be under more if you have that option on your menu. And if not, this is a pretty simple instructions.
Yeah, I am not seeing it.
Let's see. Advanced
I
sharing
just-
options. That's okay. Don't
Okay.
worry about it.
Okay.
It's all good.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna run to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Okay. Rebecca,
Yes.
maybe after the breakout rooms are done, just think about taking the break around 11:30 approximately.
Yeah.
Okay.
11:30 your time.
Oh, right. 10:30 your time.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm going to have them come back. We'll just talk for a minute and then I'll have them go out on break.
However you want to do it. And if I'm
Okay.
not quick enough on ending the break rooms, just prompt me.
Okay. We'll do it.
Okay. So they've got a warning. All the rooms are closing in less than a minute.
Okay. All right. Welcome back. As people come in, we're going to hopefully get one or two of you to share just what you would put in your professional column and what you would put in your rescuer column. And then we will take our break. I can't see if everybody's back. Some are still in breakout rooms. Okay.
The breakout rooms are closing right now.
Okay.
So everyone should be back now.
All right. Okay. So I hope that was helpful to folks. Can I get anybody to share? Just either share from your own experience, or if you want to give a summary of what you saw in the group, but please don't speak to anyone else's experience. Can I, if you're willing to share, would you raise? Okay, Sheila?
I think there was a theme in the group, and I don't want to speak for my group and I don't want to out my group, but I think there was a good theme of people just talking about like how these people are being like kind of roles of being advocates, like you're an advocate in your job, and so that just keeps on going into your personal life. Or there was like helper, like referral type roles of like I help people in my my professional role like navigate the system, and so people have no issue like, hey, can you help me find a counselor for this, or do you know this, or and then there was this kind of piece around just like that need to just like kind of practice that self-awareness. Because we do have those pieces where it kind of starts out here and it just kind of keeps going, and it can make that line real muddy at times.
Yeah. So for you, what do you do to draw that line? Or do you?
Yeah, I think that's where that self-awareness piece really came up of like, oh, like this is hitting me a different way. This looks a different way. I think that was a good suggestion in the group. I think that is still something I continue to unpack personally. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Is there someone from another group who can share with us?
I would say that for me as well, like it's those
Can you just
boundaries.
introduce who you are? Because I can't.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm-
there you are, Amanda.
I'm Amanda. I'm a social worker at Syringa Hospital and Clinics in Grangeville, Idaho. So I, I talked about the boundaries and how easy it is to slip in from that professional into the rescuer. And I would, agree with Sheila in terms of, this is what you do for work. And then you get home and, so-and-so, your friend, oh, can you help me with this? Oh, can you do that? And just making sure that those boundaries are pretty clear and, saying, well, I can, and I will give you this information, but, making them do the footwork on it.
Yeah, we have to find an end point to the
Mhm.
help. And I also sometimes I remind people like, and like, just remember this is a friendship and a two-way street. So when was the last time you like fed into the pot? Like I have a couple of people in my life that only contact me when they need a referral to this or that. And it just got to the point with one friend where I was like, hey, if you want to feed into the pot, I don't know, if you want to bring me a casserole or take my dog out for a walk or anything, if you would do anything, maybe I would have more energy to help you out. But just, for the last 5 years, you've only reached out to me when you need something. So this is really out of balance, really, really out of balance. And I think people forget that like we have limits of what we can do. All right. Any other thoughts before we go to the break out? I mean, break by break, I mean, you get to do whatever you need to do for 15 minutes. All right. So we're going to take a 15-minute break. I'm going to put that in the chat in case somebody wanders back and wonders what's happening. Okay, so I will see you all back here at the 30 mark. In Pacific Standard Time, it is 10:30. I will see you all back. It's 10:15. I'll see you all back at 10:30 Pacific Standard Time. Break. Okay. See you in a little bit. Okay, we are back. Trying to get, I can see the chat. Okay, just making sure everybody's back. So we're really going to do a deep dive for the next hour into a narrative-based protocol for how to address vicarious traumatization. I use this 9-question questionnaire to process all kinds of trauma with people. I use it with my clients as well. But if you are looking for a post-crisis trauma protocol, this would be very effective, even just to use with yourself as a journaling practice. But definitely, if you're a supervisor, this is a well-researched option for how to address trauma with folks. So let me bring the presentation back up. Okay, so in narrative therapy, if you're not experienced with it, or if you need a refresher, it's where it's very respectful, it's non-blaming, and you allow people to be an expert in their own experience. So we talk about lived experience all the time now, and this is really based in that. We trust that the knowledge that people have gained from their experiences in the world really inform their choices, and those choices are there for a reason. The problem is viewed as separate from the people, right? The problem is not everything that you are, it's something that's occurred. And we assume that people have many skills and abilities that will help them reduce the influence of the problem in their lives. So it's very, very people focused, and I find it really trauma informed. So I always can't say her name. So in the 1990s, this woman, Karen Sekvinski, and her peers wrote many books on vicarious trauma and created this 9-step questionnaire. And it's pretty simple. It works like this. And when I do it in an active listening format. So I will just ask the client or the supervisee this question, and then I will wait for them to talk until they're done, so that they can tell as much of the story as they need to. Also, when I taught, when students were in their third of their 4 quarters of internship, I would have them write a paper based on these 9 questions. And that comes out of that experience that I told you earlier, when people were graduating already so burnt out that they weren't planning on working in the field. And I was realizing, oh, we got to do more to talk about this earlier on. So and I learned about this in the Child Trauma Handbook, Ricky Greenwald. That's when I was first introduced to these 9 questions. So it works just like this. How has working with traumatized clients impacted your beliefs about the world? How has working with traumatized clients impacted your spiritual beliefs? How has working with traumatized clients impacted your sense of self, groundedness, emotional stability? And I should say, we're going to spend the next hour on these questions, so you'll have plenty of time to look at each of these in depth. How has working with traumatized clients impacted your sense of personal safety or your family's safety? How has working with traumatized clients impacted your ability to trust yourself or others? How has working with traumatized clients impacted the way you judge people? How has working with traumatized clients impacted your sense of control? How has working with traumatized clients impacted your ability to be alone or be with others? And finally, how has working with traumatized clients impacted your relationship to your body? And I'll just show my book. So in this book, I did this as a series of illustrations. So if you feel like drawing responses today, that's totally fine. For some reason, I can't see myself. There I am. So here's my response. Here's an image of how I feel about the world now. Here's an image about my spiritual beliefs. Here's an image about my sense of groundedness. Here's an image about my sense of safety. Here's an image about the way I judge people. Here's an image about my sense of control. Here's an image about my ability to be alone. And I should say for me, this work has meant like I could always be alone. I could only be alone. And then for me, how this work has impacted my body is so big that I made 2 images for that. All right, so you're gonna do we're gonna break these up into 3. I encourage you to write or make images in your phone, on your, I don't know, maybe some of you are working in Canva. Like if you want to make art about it, just really briefly. These are like quick thoughts. We're going to break these up into groups of 3 questions, and then you go into breakout rooms, share for 7 to 10 minutes. If anybody wants them at 7 and not at 10, or wants them at 10 and not at 7, please put that in the chat. We just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to share. And then we'll come back and talk as a big group. So the first question to write some notes on is how has working with traumatized clients impacted your beliefs about the world? And obviously, anything you say is valid. This is your experience. This doesn't have to make sense to anyone else but to you. And when people in the groups are sharing, please allow people's opinions to just be valid for them, right? If we're going to narrative therapy, people have these opinions for a reason. We don't have to fix them. We can trust that they have the ways to fix these problems. So the first question is, how has working with traumatized clients impacted your beliefs about the world? The next question is, how has working with traumatized clients impacted your spiritual beliefs? For some people, this work makes them more spiritual. For some people, it makes them less. There's no right or wrong answer here. We're just giving you a chance to talk about your own experience.
Are you ready for me to put everyone in breakout rooms?
We just have one more question.
Okay, sorry.
And this is a 3-parter. How has working with traumatized clients impacted your sense of self? your sense of groundedness, and your sense of emotional stability. Okay. So if you want to take a picture of this slide so that you have it with you, or write some notes down, or maybe if you printed out the presentation, for this section, we're just talking about, obviously you can talk about whatever you want, but we're going to try and focus on these three. Making sure everyone has a chance to share in the group, and just active listening. You don't have to solve anyone else's experience. We're just listening to each other, which is really, I've found, what people need the most. All right, now we're ready for the breakout room. Ready,
Okay.
Mary?
I'm ready. Here you
Okay.
go.
Great.
Am I in a group? I'm not sure.
So Karen, did you get put in a breakout room and you've come out?
No, I didn't get into a breakout room, but
Okay,
it
let me
might have been because I had jumped off my phone and gotten on my computer in the mix.
Okay, just a minute, and that might be why. Let's see here. I'm not sure if I can assign you to one right now. I'll check it out. Let's see here. Okay, I can assign you. So there we go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else need assigning, Tim or Jamie or Cheryl?
No, thank you. I'm not participating in the breakout.
Okay, just
That's
wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Jamie or Cheryl, do you want to participate in the breakout rooms?
No, thank you.
Did you say? Okay. Rebecca, how long did you want them in there?
Oh, so the same as last time. Is it?
Okay, I
10
did it
minutes?
for 10 minutes.
Okay,
And so,
perfect.
okay, just wanted to be sure.
Is everybody there or am I frozen?
No, we're here. We're just waiting for everybody to come back.
Okay, thank you.
They should all be back now.
Okay. All right. So let's get into that set. Is there anybody that we haven't heard from yet who would be willing to share about these three, the first three? Beliefs about the world, spiritual beliefs, sense of self, groundedness, and emotional stability. Anyone willing to raise their hand or share with the group? Betty, go ahead and unmute yourself. There we go. Great. What came up for you?
One of the biggest lessons that I learned when you first started talking about it was, there it for the grace of God, there go I. I work in the social juice field, and so it impacted my life a lot. It increased my spiritual belief, reduced my religiosity, and changed the way I saw people too. I really believe people have their own answers. They just need help finding them. It increased my awareness of language and how it's used, not only verbally, but non-verbally. So the words I have in my head, they really impact how I treat people.
Mhm.
So I'm really careful about how I view people. It isn't an addict, it's a person living with addiction.
Yeah.
And it's a person living with depression. It's a person living with. And it changed the way I treated people and viewed people.
Mhm.
I use it in my unprofessional life too.
Yeah. Thank you.
I learned as many lessons from my clients as I hope that I taught them.
Yeah. I know, we sure do learn a lot of stuff, don't we?
So I was grateful for my experiences.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Thank you, Betty.
You're welcome.
All right. Anyone else willing to share? Any themes come up in your own writing or in your groups? Any hands up before we move to the next one? All right. So since not everybody's using the breakout rooms, we're gonna do this next one, these next three. I'm gonna have you do the writing, and then hopefully someone will volunteer to do a kind of fishbowl session and we can talk it out. in front of everybody. And definitely folks can share in the chat if something big comes up. So the next three, oops, sorry, my keypad's super sensitive. If you would write down your own notes on this one. How has working with traumatized clients impacted your sense of personal safety or your family's safety? How has working with traumatized clients impacted the way that you trust yourself or others? And then finally, how has working with traumatized clients impacted the way you judge people? Take a minute and do a little writing on that. And then I don't want to have to call on anybody. But who would be willing to kind of talk it out with me in front of the group about some of those three issues? Can I get a hand up? Anybody willing? Okay, Leanna, am I saying that right? There you are. All right,
Yes.
thank you. All
You're
right,
welcome.
so should we go through one by one?
Ooh, I get to do all. Okay.
Or do you just want to do one? You pick. You volunteered first. Why don't you pick the one that speaks most to you? Which one would you like to do?
How about the safety one? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how has working with traumatized clients impacted your sense of personal safety or your family's safety?
Quite a bit. This one kind of hit me of like, oh, that sense of just the word safe, feeling safe. Like, I don't think I've used that word so much. I mean, like prior to being a therapist, that really wasn't in my vocabulary. I mean, somewhat, but now it's all about being safe. So for me personally, and then of course helping clients feel safe and figuring that out. So just the heavy focus on safety, emotional safety, physical safety, spiritual, going through all of those quadrants of what does feeling safe mean, and just diving into that, defining that, talking to others, hearing what their safety is, and just, I mean, so that whole spectrum of just what is feeling safe, what does that mean on all those levels as for client, and then for me professionally of, I, early in my field, I don't want to be on social media anymore. I, protecting my address, and I live in a medium-sized city. However, I do, am concerned with, just safety of where my house is, or, those types of things. I never would have thought about that. And so, even so, sometimes I'll be doing assessments with, I work, in corrections as well, like half correction. I have multiple jobs. So I'm private and corrections, and private sector, that kind of thing. But like my background is blurred, or, like those, be careful what's in your office. Of course they teach us that in school too, of, if you have pictures up, or if it shares any personal stuff, like, so it's just a whole kind of a level of safety, personally, professionally, but then also helping clients, what does that mean to feel safe with them?
And do you find that do you think if you had a different job, you would be on social media more? Like, do you think you've kind of had to alter your personal life in order to do this work? Yeah.
Definitely, absolutely. And just the separate of, you know what, I'm home, I'm myself, I don't want to mix them. I know I've talked to many colleagues, you know, throughout the years here of that personal professional boundaries, and I don't want to mix them. I want it to be pretty separate. And even so much so that I'm, you know, maybe not as engaged at work when, you know, I have a couple jobs that I do have fellow coworkers, you know, still small group, but I'm not going to do the after hour thing. I'm not engaged in any of that. I just want it separate, the work versus personal.
Yeah. And do you think your family knows that it's impacted your sense of safety, the work that you do?
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My spouse is aware of that. And, you know, just the whole, you know, how much can I share, or, you know, being approached on the street from a client, you know, he knows exactly what to do. And that's to, you know, walk away immediately, you know, just things that we've had to prepare, you know, if something, you know, if I run into a client or if there is some kind of an issue, just, yeah, that preparation.
Yeah. I remember there's certain friends that are new to my life, and I have to explain, oh, if we walk into a situation and I veer strangely to the left or sit in a seat that you're like, why is she sitting over there? Please just respect that I have to do that because of my profession. And they're like, what? Like, I'm a real estate agent. What are you talking about? You know, but I think people don't understand that, you know, that our work can impact us out in the real world.
And just my own, like, just from my own personal trauma, I mean, I've always been just the person that, you know, the back to the wall in the back, you know, like never back to the door, like, you know, those types of things, scanning the room, you know, just that whole hypervigilance. I mean, that's just part of me, but then adding, you know, being a counselor and learning those skills too. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for being a fishbowl number 2.
Okay. You're welcome.
So folks can either put in the chat, or I can get someone to do another fishbowl with me. But so this next one, how has this work impacted the way you trust yourself or trust others? Can I get anyone to do a hand up on that one, or put it in the chat? Emily, is that your hand up? Or Nilesh?
I'll do it.
Okay. And then Nilesh, you'll do the next one. All right. Joy?
I like, because it can re-traumatize. Well, first of all, I'm a peer support specialist and not a clinician, but I've been doing it for over 12 years. And I do work with a lot of people that have trauma, because I work with, plus I'm a recovery coach, people getting out of prison and also people coming off the streets. And I also run some support groups. And so some mental health and smart recovery. So I do get people that are suicidal or have and I do know QPR, and I do know when to pass them on to somebody else or take them to the crisis center. But sometimes they just kind of blurt it out and stuff. So it has the fact that it can re-traumatize me because I have post-traumatic stress. And so I get a sense that, can I do this job? Self-esteem issues.
So that's one way you ask, can you trust yourself to do the work?
Yeah. And so, yeah. Because sometimes it's hard to stop them when they're, you know, because I have to do intakes and stuff. And when they're in the midst of telling me what's going on, I'm like, you know, I'm not a clinician. I need to stop you there and find you the right resource. It's kind of, you know, when they're crying and telling me what's going on, it's hard to stop them. But
so it's always the potential of them, re-traumatizing me. I've had that
Mhm.
happen a few times, but I also know self-care and time to call my therapist.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, but that's the potential of working with people that that have trauma when you've also experienced trauma yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Joy. I mean, I think that's really the question of, can I do this work, is a huge piece of trusting yourself. And what I've also heard from folks is that one of the pieces of trusting yourself or trusting others is that people start to not trust others. They might think that everyone is an abuser, or if they have a conversation with anyone, X or Y is going to happen. So it can be really hard to kind of unwind your nervous system, and just realize, like, you're going to have rough conversations. You're allowed to excuse yourself. So I'm just going to read what Emma wrote because it's really interesting. Oops. This chat, it's just, oh boy, can I scroll down? How do I get back to Emma? She says that at times she's less judgmental of others. Working with traumatized clients has helped me see that unresolved trauma is everywhere and impacts how people make choices, treat themselves, see the world, etc. I'm a much more understanding person because of this work, even though I'm less trusting. So right, we hold that dichotomy, right? Like we've seen all these things. I mean, I find that people will continue to tell me all kinds of stories, and I've learned to trust myself, that sometimes I have to be like, hey, thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to wander around the room a little bit, but like sometimes I have to excuse myself, because people's stories get so intense. So I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Nilesh, would you be our person for how has working with traumatized clients impacted the way you judge people? Can I get you back? There you are. Am I saying your name right? Yes.
You did.
Oh, fantastic. All right. How has working with traumatized clients impacted the way you judge people?
Definitely negatively. I mean, as with
Oops, I muted you. Hold on. Somehow I muted you.
You're unmute. You need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. All right. That was me. Sorry. Go start again.
all right. So definitely I judge people a lot because of the experiences I've had. Having worked in child protection and now as a clinician, that all kind of stays with me, and I have to force myself out of that. And even then, it's still really difficult to be able to say, no, this is not. But experience has shown me that, you just can't. It goes back to being able to trust people, or the sense of control. As Emma had said, I have more trust in myself than with anybody around me. That impacts everything. Who can be around my kids, who can be around my family, what type of activities I'm going to be engaging in, where I'm going to be going, who's around me all the time. And I think Leanna said it also is, when I'm in a room, my back is to the wall, and I know where my escape route is. I know how to get myself and my family safe. So I definitely judge people. It's a given.
Do you think that people around you notice the change in you, that you're now much more focused on this?
My wife definitely has. From before I started doing this work and to now, she definitely sees that I have changed and I'm not as trusting of anybody. So.
And in terms of judging people, what allows you to trust people again? Or are there people who can now gain your trust, even though?
I think one of the biggest things I live by is trust is gained over time.
Mhm.
And so with anybody that tries to get into my circle, I observe them basically and see how they're doing. And over time, if they are who they say they are, then they are invited into my circle.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Do you want to share any other final nugget before? Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. So okay, you're muted yourself. Everybody here is so well Zoomified. We've all gotten it down over the years. Okay, sorry, I gotta move this so I can get to this. Okay, so we're in the final three. You learn from listening to each other. So I'm gonna continue to ask for 3 fish bowls because we can see that the groups aren't really being used. So just as we talk, or as I go through these, 3 of you again, please volunteer to be in a fishbowl again so that your peers can really hear what you have to say, because that's actually where we learn the most. It's those little nuances in your experience. So if you would take a minute and symbols, words, thoughts, we're going to go through these final 3. So how has working with traumatized clients impacted your sense of control? And I've heard people say they need way more control than they've needed in other jobs, or some people just really want to be able to let loose on the weekends. And this next one for me has been the biggest. How has working with traumatized clients impacted your ability to be alone or to be with others? And then finally, and this can also be a big one for people, and it's okay if any of these haven't impacted you. These are 9 really global questions. We're going from the very global to the extremely personal. And so, for some of you, one of these, actually, every time I do this with somebody, one of them, they're like, not at all. That's perfectly fine too. But finally, how has working with traumatized clients impacted your relationship to your body?
So, Rebecca, are you looking for volunteers to fishbowl with you? Right
Yes. Are you volunteering, Bradley?
Sure.
Okay. Whoops. Which one would you like to choose since you went first?
The bottom one.
Okay. So, and it was helpful to hear what everybody's job was. So why don't you tell us what you do for work?
I'm a clinical social worker.
Okay.
And a certified rehabilitation counselor.
Great.
And I work in a private nonprofit setting. And I've done this job now for 18 years or so. And at first, I don't know, decade or so, I really was gung-ho and I loved everything about the job. And, I just enjoyed coming to work every day and had a lot of energy and felt like I was doing an important work. And I felt good about everything. My body felt good. And I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, I started having, just lower energy and daily massive headaches and, just muscle tension and just various nebulous pains throughout my body. And I didn't know what was happening or why. And so then I started learning about trauma and, the somatic experience, and the body keeps the score, and, just the polyvagal theory. And I started learning about all this stuff as a way to help my clients, and quickly realized that it was me.
Right. Me too.
Yeah. I just needed this more than anybody. And so I started doing, more mindfulness and self-care and, walks throughout the neighborhood with my dog, and exercising, and just going to counseling. I hadn't been to counseling in years. And anyway, so I started doing more things to help myself. But it was started with all of those physical manifestations of the stress. Now all of a sudden, oh my gosh, like it took time, but through consciously working on it, I don't have the headaches anymore. I'm able to sleep through the night. I'm just feeling so much better and re-energized and hopeful about my job. And I feel like I'm able to help people better because I was able to realize what was happening and kind of rejuvenate my body, and that rejuvenated my mind and my heart.
Well, that is a perfect story of this. Thank you so much for sharing. And when you look back, could you see the signs building that you might, And so what were some of, this is always helpful for people to hear, what are some of the early signs that you realized you were ignoring?
Yeah, some of the earlier signs were like, I'd rather be in bed than go to work today. Just feeling like there's way too much to do than I can ever get done. Some of that negative self-talk, like what I do didn't make a difference. I started just not enjoying the work anymore, not feeling fulfilled.
Yeah.
And of course the bodily things, like I started just having poor sleep, having headaches, muscle tension. I stopped going to things outside of work that I would have enjoyed previously. And once I started doing the self-care, like my wife and I, one of our favorite things is to read books. So we will take our little camp chairs and we will go down to the river and we will just put our feet in the water and we'll just read a book near each other, but we don't have to talk to enjoy that experience. And they're just doing things like that I know are for me.
Yeah. Well,
totally
and social isolation is one of the first things that happens, right? You decide, I'll just be better if I'm by myself.
Right. I don't think I can handle this social situation or going to this church or community activity because I don't want to have to talk to anyone.
Yeah. And so, Bradley, what was the first sign that you were doing better?
I don't know. It seems like it's all kind of come together. But yeah, definitely I started sleeping better. That was a really big one that I noticed. The headaches was another big one. And then consciously aware of, I'm excited to go to work today. And that hasn't always been the case, So I think it's just a process of being more aware of what's happening in your body and in your mindset, your self-talk, all of that stuff makes a big difference.
Yeah. And I think what you said about sleep is so interesting. There are a set of cells in our brain, they're sweeper cells, and they sweep out all the junk. And if we don't sleep, those sweeper cells don't do the job. And the junk builds and builds and builds. And so it is these small changes. Oh, I'm sleeping. Or I'm
like looking forward to seeing that client. I don't want this session to end, things like that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Bradley. That was perfect. Now, Terry, you haven't had your physical hand up this whole time, but you've had your virtual hand up. Which one do you want to share on?
Well, I think sense of control, and I think the last three all clunk up together with me. I'm a person who wears my emotions on, how I think and how I feel. Unfortunately, I can't do well.
And remind us what you do for work.
Sorry. I work and I'm a social worker, and I work with 2 court programs here in my town. And so I work in mental health and addiction, and I've worked with sex offenders, but predominantly, with the criminal justice system. So, I wear whatever. You can always tell when I'm sad. You can always tell when I'm sick. You can tell anything. And so for me, learning to like understand how my movements can really affect my rapport with my clients, and really like how I can carry myself, and how that like affects my body, and learning when I'm carrying like other people's trauma with me, like it's taken me a long time. I've been doing this for a long time, so it's taken me a long time to really just kind of understand and listen to my body. And there's times where I need to be alone, and I honor that, but I also have to find that balance of like, I need to engage, like, even though I don't want to, I need to engage with, and I need to go to this barbecue, and I always have fun when I do or whatever. But so when I'm not in control of myself, like it affects my rapport with my clients, it affects my rapport with me, it affects like how I stay connected to like my ability to be within myself. And then if I leave that unchecked for a while, then I definitely become mentally more unstable. And so, I mean, all of these things absolutely tie into each other, but as the gentleman was saying before, like being that aware of yourself, and it takes time to like really understand. I think especially for social workers, we're so focused, or clinicians or whatever, we're so focused on thinking about other people that we fail to forget, like we need to pay attention to ourselves. We're good at teaching people the triggers and fail to acknowledge ourselves. And so, the gentleman before me, sorry, I forgot your name. He was talking about how him and his wife go down to the river and read. Like that's part of that self-care. Like I need to do this. I need to step away. That connection, being intact with the body.
And what's your first sign that your body's, you're starting to flood?
Oh, my mind just will not shut up. It like, and I've learned how to control my mind, but like, for me, it's like ruminating. It's and then of course I'm thinking about things that happened 50 years ago, not that long ago, but even ancestral, maybe, I don't know. But, and then it just kind of titrates from there. And then I can get into that negative voice of like, and so for me, it's like, oh, and then my anxiety, my heart, my stomach starts turning, like, and my thinking is like unclear. So for me, that's like, you need to take a step back. Where's this coming from? Why is this resonating with you? Like, how do you need to release it? And so sitting, there's a time that we have to be alone and just kind of like diffuse, because we carry lots of energy with us. We carry so much energy. And, sometimes it's just nice to like just release others' energy and not have anybody in that space. But, and when I don't feel in contact with my body, I can really kind of disassociate. I can start, eating more, even though I'm not hungry, or else I'll not eat. I'll forget to eat. And,
right. Yeah, we can get really out of touch.
Yeah. So with me, everything's like one extreme or another. That's just who I am. So for me, like, I don't go small, I go big one way or the other. So, having that understanding of my body has really, and how I am, has really kind of helped me be able to understand when I'm out of sync.
And I asked that body question when I started doing my sensory training. At Seattle, we're all bundled up all winter long, and it became summer and I put on a short sleeve shirt and I noticed I had all of these little bruises all over my arm, and I couldn't figure out what I was doing. And then one day I was in a session with a client and I realized this ring, I had my arm here and I was pressing in so hard like this that I had bruised myself. And I was like, oh, that's my sign that I'm flooded. If I am, if I get in this position with a client, I'm not in a good space and I need to do something. And so there's this way in which our bodies kind of habitually tense, or those headaches or those overeating, right? When we get in that unconscious space and we don't even know what we're doing, that's a really good sign that we need to get back in touch with ourselves and kind of check in. So somebody wrote, I wanted to read so thank you for sharing. That was awesome. That's exactly the kind of thing I was hoping for today. So let me just read what Karen wrote. I grew up in New York City and learned not to trust people, strangers, in order to stay safe. That actually prepared me for work in this field. What I have learned additionally is to not judge people. Everyone's behavior makes sense once you understand their worldview and their past experiences, right? So some of us came into this work knowing some stuff, right? Like people always ask me, how have you made it 25 years? And I was like, well, my family was pretty complicated. Like, it's not so odd, the things that I'm hearing every day. But we also kind of even learn more. We even learn an added level. All right, one more volunteer on this one?
I can do it.
Okay, is that Emma?
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
I had my camera turned off.
Can you remind us what you do for work, Emma?
Yeah, so I'm a LCSW, and I actually get to work with Brad and Neelish. So we work for the same company, just in different locations. So on this ability to be alone and to be with others, so I'm an extrovert by nature. So like, I don't love being alone just in general. But I found as I've worked more in this field, like my ability to be able to be alone has actually increased because I've felt a need for that. There's some healing and power that comes from just being able to do that, but it has to be done in a really intentional way. And so like I do have like a meditation app on my phone that I'm not as great at as I should be. I don't want to shit on myself though, but like
that's why they call
it.
They call it the practice. That's why they call it
Yes.
the practice of meditation. Practice. You keep practicing.
Yes, lots of practice, lots of opportunities to practice that more. Anyway, but when I do that more regularly, it certainly helps. And there's other things in my life that I do, like there's prayer and reading, like Brad was talking about, or I like to spend time in scriptures as well. Like there's things that I do on my own where I can do that. And about being with others, I think one way working with traumatized clients has impacted that is sometimes I feel like I've lost the ability to like surface level talk with people, because all I do all day long is like deep talk with people. And so like sometimes I remember that like, oh yeah, you probably shouldn't ask questions like that in a normal social setting. And so sometimes I maybe put myself in some awkward social situations because of the work that I do each and every day. It's hard to turn that off sometimes.
Yeah. So what's your first sign that you need to turn off? What are your early signs?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I think I'd have to ponder that a little bit more. Yeah, I'd have to think on that.
Okay. I mean, so you'll notice, so you notice I asked that a couple times for folks. And that's one of the techniques that I do with people, because like Bradley was saying, people tend to come to us when like the train has gone off the rails, right?
Yeah.
We can be so far gone, or I got to the point where I had adult Epstein-Barr. And I could sleep like 14, 16 hours a day. And, I really had to get my health back. But, starting to talk with people like, oh, what were the early signs? Like, how did I get here? I didn't just like wake up here one morning. How did my system get that depleted?
Yeah.
And for me, one of my early signs was like I had kind of like my therapist I just noticed I wore the same clothes every day. Like it was just like, and that's not who I am. Like I'm an artist. If you see me now, like I stand out in Seattle because I'm wearing, I mean, look at these glasses. Like, like I'm kind of, I enjoy dressing up. But I had just gotten so drained by the work. I just kind of had like this uniform that I just put on and like dragged myself to work. And then like, then I was 5 minutes late, and then I was 15 minutes late every day, right? Like there was like this kind of building. So it is a really interesting question to just ponder, like, what are my early signs?
Yeah, well, and it's interesting too, because, talking about that, I was thinking, oh, what's my warning sign by myself or with other people? But I think with me, the warning signs are in all of these other questions, right? Like, oh, maybe it's in the safety area, or how I'm feeling my body and that kind of thing. Because sometimes it's hard to kind of pair out between all of these different questions, because they're all completely impacting each other all the time, right? Like, so I think that's maybe where I got caught up a little bit too, of like, oh, I don't know what that is, like in a conversation with someone. I don't know where I need to stop. Maybe I need to do some thinking on that. But yeah, like looking at these other things, yeah, like there's some other signs there. Yeah.
All right, Emma, thank you so much. Your organization's so lucky. You guys are you've got 3 eager to participate people in this. All right, so just some follow-up questions. If you noticed any themes, or if there were any surprises for you in your answer. I mean, the theme that I really hear from folks today was, I was in pretty bad shape when I realized I was in over my head. And that's part of the community support. And we probably can't hear from our friends. Obviously, we know from the work we do, like you have to be ready to do the work and to change, and things can get pretty intense before we're ready to do that. And it might be a friend, or I mean, people have said that to me really recently, like, wow, I've never seen you I haven't seen you this happy in a long time. Like we can kind of come back out of our shells. And for surprises, it's lovely to hear how much of you really love your work. I don't know what's in the water over there in Idaho, but it seems like for many of you, this work has been really, really powerful and really positive. All right, so that was our narrative time, and now we're gonna go over into mindfulness. Let me see how much of this I want to read. I'll just paraphrase a little bit. So we can encounter events or losses that push us into an emergency state. Many of us see, we don't have to go far. We see our clients, we turn on the news, and everybody's kind of at this state of hyper-arousal. And that can activate thoughts and perspectives and behaviors that paradoxically, and this is a Buddhist concept, add to suffering, right? So this is the Jack Kornfield concept of the map maker, that within all of us is a child who found strategies of coping through that childhood trauma. But now, as an adult, those coping strategies aren't working so great. But we keep going back to them, right? Because that's habitually what we know how to do. And so Jack Kornfield would say, in mindfulness, the work is to have the map maker stand down, thank them for their service, and find new ways of being. So here we are, paradoxically, in an experience that adds to our suffering. We may feel so bad that we end up thinking that we are bad. And we blame ourselves for what happened and expect it to happen again, right? We get in that like hypervigilant state. And in our pain, we might do whatever we can to feel less overwhelmed. We might use drugs or alcohol, or distract ourselves, or dissociate, or be in denial. Or we may withdraw from the world and pull into ourselves and stay there. And all of these reactions are perfectly understandable considering the state of the world. And what mindfulness practice asks us to do is to slow down and gently step back into the world. Just gently observe what we're seeing, what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we're hearing, what we're tasting. And then that gentleness, we begin to trust and be able to be present in the world again. All right, so I'm going to do a little guided meditation with you guys about metta, which is the idea of kind of loving kindness. So if you would get comfy in any way that you can, if that means, sitting back in your chair, maybe getting all the wiggles out a little bit. Obviously only doing this meditation if it feels safe for you to close your eyes. If you want to just doodle or write down thoughts while you're listening to me, that's fine. There's no right or wrong way to do what we're about to do right now. So if you softly focus your eyes, you don't have to look at the screen. Close them if that feels safe for you. And we're going to take a few breaths, breathing in and holding that breath and breathing out and breathing in again and holding and breathing out and breathing in again and holding that breath and then gently breathing out. And as you breathe in and out, imagine that as you breathe out, you can breathe out the cares of today, knowing that they'll be there at the end of this meditation, but that you don't have to hold them right now. And any sound that you may hear will only deepen your sense of meditation. We're going to start with wiggling your toes and just being present with your feet. And breathing in and out there. And if you can, allowing any tensions of the day to just drain out of your feet. Just let your feet do any movements that feel safe, or any kind of wiggling, or maybe you feel a need to bring your hand to your foot and give it a gentle rub, just allowing yourself to really see if you're holding any tension there. Then bringing your attention to your calves, maybe contracting and flexing your calves there, and allowing your breath to move through there. Sometimes that's a place we can hold a lot of tension or stress. And then feeling your knees, they do so much for us. Feeling any tension that might be there. Taking a breath and letting yourself release any tension there. And then feeling your thighs. Maybe giving them a little bit of a gentle rub. Seeing if there's any tension there. Breathing in and out gently at your own rhythm. And if you need a word to focus back on, if you feel yourself get distracted, just bring yourself back to the word relax. Just feeling relaxing and safe in this moment. Then bringing your attention to your low back. Seeing if there's any wiggles that need to happen there, or any stretches. Rotating your hips maybe to the side or back or forth. Letting yourself continue to breathe gently. Finding that word again. The word is relax. And then taking a big breath into your lungs. Our lungs do so much for us. Tapping back into your gentle breathing is a wonderful way to get grounded at any time. If you feel tension or stress. And then bringing your attention to your hands, maybe making a fist and then releasing or wiggling your fingers. Whatever feels safe. Just getting in touch with your hands again. Then we're going to bring our attention to our shoulders. Maybe you need to roll them or push them forward or back. If you need an even bigger stretch, you can give yourself a hug. Maybe with one arm over the other. And if you've never tried it, give your brain a brain teaser and give yourself a hug the other direction. I'm finding that I'm kind of rocking here. If you need your body to do any kind of motion here. Breathing in and out slowly and comfortably. And then we're going to bring our attention to the back of where your neck meets your body. People can tend to hold a lot of tension there. You might want to get a bit of a gentle rub or just kind of imagine the tension melting from that place. We hold so much stress in our shoulders. And allowing your breath to be slow and natural. And at any point, if you get distracted, just coming back to that word, and the word is relax. And then the muscles of your face. If you've never done this before, you might want to tense up all the muscles of your face, imagine them all scrunched up. Then take a good deep breath out. And then just let your face relax if you can. And then we're just going to think about the concept of being loving towards yourself. And just if you can, in this moment, know that the person most deserving of your loving kindness is you. And if you can hold on to that loving kindness just for a minute, just being gentle with yourself and thanking yourself for the work that you've done in the world. And we're going to introduce the concept that you've done enough. You've been good enough. You've helped your clients enough. You've helped your friends enough. You've helped yourself enough. With the skills that you've had, you've done enough. And so taking a few more gentle breaths there. Breathing in. Noticing if there's any changes in the way that your body feels. Hopefully you feel the same as when you started, but maybe you feel much, much better. And whenever you're ready, open your eyes and come back to the room. So for our mindfulness practice, we're going to play with the idea that you are doing a good job. And for some people, this can be hard to tolerate. So we're going to break into the small groups again. Please participate in this one. It's your last one to really check in with your peers. Please turn your camera on. And you're going to you can either speak to your own experience of what it's like to hear the idea that you're doing a good job, or if you've got a very active group and people feel safe, you can practice saying it to each other and just see how your body responds. Some people have a really intense body reaction. And just to remember, body reactions can be, I felt tight, or I felt hot, or I felt numb, or that made me think I was going to cry, or I stopped breathing. Those are all ways that your body can respond. Or I felt very soft. I felt very ready. So Mary, are we ready to do some breakout rooms?
We are. Do you want them to be the same size, about 3 to 4 people each room as
Let's do
before?
them bigger, 5 to 7, just to make sure there's more participation. And then let's have this group be 7 minutes long.
Okay, 7 minutes, you said?
Yeah.
All right, options. Okay, I'm gonna open the rooms.
Okay, thanks so much.
All right. Is anyone that's not in a breakout room wanting to be in a breakout room right now? Please let me know and I can put you in one. diet and exercise, get out holding a mannequin. Forty more seconds.
Okay.
I was wrong. It was 40 more seconds before the 1 minute
Oh.
countdown. So it's about 45 more seconds now.
Okay. All right. So for those of you who are back, I'd love to hear just in the chat, could you tolerate hearing that you were doing a good job? Could that land with you? Or did you reject it? A simple, how about yes, I could hear it, or no, I could not hear it. I gotta learn how to do that poll so we can get a sense. Okay, Betty could hear it. Cassie, depends on who it comes from. That's interesting. I want to know more about that. So just gonna type it to everyone. Could you hear that you are doing good job? Yes, but maybe with a little doubt. All right. So, that question of yes, but it depends. Cassie Anderson, would you be willing to talk to me for a minute? Yes.
Hi.
Hi. So tell me about, so your answer was so interesting. It depends who says it.
It does. Yeah, because sometimes I feel like it's just such a blanket statement. Like people will be like, "Oh, you're doing a good job," and it's like, "Yeah, that's not really meaningful. You're just saying that," kind of thing. So, but if like it comes from someone that I feel like I have a good connection with, and they're like, "Wow, you're doing a really good job," then I accept that. But it has to have that meaning behind it for me. So.
Yeah. So tell me how you want to be, who knows you well enough, who knows you in a way that you would want to hear this? Is it the type?
Family would be a big one for me. So
Okay.
like my husband or like my parents, those kind of things I wanna hear it from. My boss, you know, things that make an impact in my life that way.
So isn't it interesting? It goes back to that slide in the first hour about social support, right? Like we need to hear it from the right people.
Right. Yeah. And then I talked about too in our group, like my primary love language is words of affirmations. So if it doesn't have meaning to it, I just pick up on that instantly. So yeah, I want intentional connection, not force.
Yeah. Is there anyone who hasn't said it to you that you'd like to hear it from?
I think everyone would say yes to that. Yeah, like my kids, it would be great to hear it from my kids every now and then. But you know, teenagers, so
yeah, they do. Mine's 20 now. They do now say to me, "Oh, you were pretty good."
right. Yeah, it comes back around in your 20s, I think, which I tell my parents all the time now because I know how much I didn't say it. So now I make sure to, but yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for being on the spot.
Of course.
Sarah Cobb, would you be willing to talk to me for a minute in front of the group? I don't know where you are.
Me, okay.
Yes. Okay. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
So imposter syndrome is one of my favorite topics. Can you just speak a little bit to what it's like for you at the beginning of your career to hear that you're doing a good job?
It's just really hard. I mean, I want to hear it, but then at the same time, when I hear it, I immediately am like, no, I don't know enough. I'm not good enough. I'm never gonna learn, all I need to know to, be good at this, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's a struggle.
So can I ask you a few more questions just so that the group can learn some stuff? Is that a yes or a no?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just, trying not to cry.
Okay. Okay, good. So let's start there. So the tears are already there for you.
Yeah.
And is that self-doubt, or is that fear that you're going to hurt somebody, or what happens there when the tears come?
Yeah, all of that. Yeah. Yeah, I want to be a good counselor, and I'm just afraid of, not being as good as I'd like to be, not really doing as much good as I want to. Fear of doing something accidentally, that's gonna harm people. Yeah, just all those kind of things.
Can I teach you a somatic exercise right now? Did you do the give yourself a hug thing when I taught it, when I was talking through it in the guided meditation?
No.
Okay. Can I teach you something today that's going to help you along your career?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you try to give yourself a hug? And everybody, if you didn't do it, and just take a breath there. Does anything happen in your body when we do this? And you can stop at any time. I'm not going to force you to stay in that position.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I can take a little bit of a deeper breath. Like it forces me to take a deep breath, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. I tend to breathe a little shallow a lot of the time.
Right. That's a great point, right? When we're starting to stress, we're no, 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 no. We've stopped breathing.
Yeah.
And if you can take a breath and you can teach your client to take a breath, it's big, because we do stop thinking, right? It's everything I just did in that first hour, right? Your brain actually goes offline. And you're in that feeling part of like, oh God, I've chosen the wrong profession and I'm going to make everyone's life worse.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, is there anything you'd like to hear from the group? You've got this mass amount of people who've done this for a while. Is there anything you'd like to hear from us about how to know that we're doing a good enough job?
Good question. I'm not really sure though. I mean, I guess just any pointers for anyone who's struggled with this, struggled with imposter syndrome, and or maybe any advice or suggestions you would give your past self, right, when you were new and just starting out, or a student, or an internship, that kind of thing. What would you tell yourself that you needed to hear, that you could have taken in?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to hear my advice?
Yeah.
You just gotta keep showing up. It sounds really counterintuitive, but this work is really a muscle. And it's the hardest and the weirdest part is just, if you keep showing up, you get better. And you also learn that you get worse. That's okay.
Or the more you think, like, I don't know anything, right?
Yeah. But that actually, mostly what people need is for you, they probably don't need, here's another, I'm just dropping nuggets, throwing them at you, I'm lobbing them over the fence. Your clients probably need you most to just listen. And one thing I do with clients is I'll say, would you like my advice?
Oh, yeah.
And I let that, because sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
But if you will read through the chats, you've gotten more nuggets thrown at you, because we've all been right where you are. I remember in my first evaluation, it was like 1 to 5, like this is back when you got like a paper eval.
Yeah.
And she gave me all these 3s. And I was like, what? What? Like, I'm not even at a 4, I'm at a 3. Right. And I just thought, well, this is over for me.
Yeah.
So goes that boat. But really, here I am 25 years later, like I just kept showing up, like I'm going to keep practicing. But yeah, go ahead and read. I'm going to get you off the hot seat. I
just got my midterm evaluation today, and I got 2 3s and the rest were 5s. But I know, of course, the thing I'm thinking is like, I want to ask, like, okay, what can I do to improve those 3s, right? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that I need room to grow. Like, of course, I'm not perfect. It'd be kind of silly if I did get all 5s, but part of me still wants all 5s, right?
Yeah. And the interesting thing about your clients is your clients are going to give you lots of 1s and 2s.
Great.
And part of this, what always shocks me about this work is like, who knows what I say in a session, I can't even remember. And a client will come back the next week and they're like, you said something that really stuck with me. I'm like, oh God, what is it? Tell me so I can remember to say it again. And there was just this nugget. Like the other week, I said to this woman, we are the adults in the room. We're the adults. And she was like, oh, wow. She made a whole bunch of really interesting life decisions based on that one statement that I have no memory of saying. All right, Cassie, go ahead.
Thank you.
I was just going to give a piece of advice if you wanted it as well. I always tell my mentees that, and I know it sounds a little bit awful at first, but you're not going to mess anyone up more than they already are when you're working with them. Like, they're there to get help and they're seeking services from you. Like, if someone's already having negative thoughts, they're already having those. You're not going to create those in them. You know, so you're learning along with them. And so you have to give yourself grace, right? Having those feelings is valid too, right? I always tell them, you know, like, feel that because it's valid. And if you weren't thinking it, I'd be like a little concerned, right? If you weren't worried that you weren't doing a good job as a supervisor, I'd be like, you know, this person might think that they know it all or that kind of thing. So give yourself some grace with that and just know that those are normal feelings.
I love it. All right, we'll keep putting those good thoughts in the chat. And Sarah, we've all been there. In this room, there's probably like 1,000 years of combined mental health experience. So we've totally all been there. All right, I'm gonna jump back to the screen sharing the presentation. We're kind of in the last 9 minutes. So I'll make sure there's a little time at the end. So when helping hurts. So I have there's a couple stories in the book. I'm going to do a little bibliotherapy. And I can't see myself, which is making me crazy. Okay. So in Jungian therapy, the archetype for the wounded healer or vicarious trauma is Chiron, who, if you've read Percy Jackson, you know, is the very first half horse, half person, a centaur. And so because they were the very first one, they were immortal. So this is going back, if you guys read Greek myths in 8th grade, we're going back to one of those myths. And they were a great teacher. But you know what? Their peers rose against them and there was a battle and they were hurt in battle. And they went into the cave to heal themselves. But in order to heal themselves, they had to give up being immortal because the wound couldn't heal in their immortal state. And so they just had to become human and mortal in order to heal. And that's when they realized they had to be a full person in order to heal. So I love that story in terms of thinking about vicarious traumatization and compassion fatigue, that we can get so built up in thinking that we need to be kind of what Sarah was talking about, like perfect in this work, or that we're awful in this work, that we kind of forget. You can tell that you're in a place of compassion fatigue or vicarious trauma or the Sunday scaries if you forget to just be a person that has huge needs, you know, that you need to meet your spiritual needs and you need to eat and you need to sleep and you need to do your hobbies. One of my favorite stories about this work was someone that I was supervising was working in a small town and they were in like their first or second year of their career. And they asked one of their peers, what do I need to study next? You know, what theory do I need to learn or what certification do I need to get? And their supervisor was like, oh no, that's not the question. The question is, what hobby do you need to get deeper into? What thing do you need to build up outside of this work? And I love that story. It always reminds me, like, my hobbies are as important to this work as learning any new theory or any next level of certification. All right, so that is the end of my presentation. You've got all of these resources at the end. If you want to learn more, one thing that's really interesting, Trauma and Recovery by Judith Herman. That was the very first book written to think that PTSD was something that we could heal from. It was written in 1992. And she just put out the compendium to it, her thoughts on all of this. Oh my God, is it like 40 years later? So that's a really interesting resource that's new that I need to add to this list. It's not on it. So I'm gonna pop out of sharing my screen. So we've just got 5 minutes left. Is there any questions, any final questions or statements that anybody has? Anything that I didn't get to that you're like, thought was going to be covered in this presentation? Nope, shaking your heads. All right, well, you know where to find me. I'm on Instagram if you want to keep in touch, or I am a bi-monthly guest on the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm just going to type that in here. We have a lot of really in-depth conversations about a lot of really cool stuff on that podcast. If you, yeah, I don't know. Any other thoughts? All right. Well, you guys all take care of yourself. This work is only the second hardest job in America. So, so you're doing a good job at it. Think of that. Think of that. Every time you're like, I'm not doing a good job, just think, this is the second hardest job in America. I am doing a good job.
Thank you, Rebecca. What a wonderful presentation. I want to remind everybody to either check your confirmation or reminder email for your full CEU requirements. And you're going to find your evaluation email in your inbox within a couple hours after we're done here. And it needs to be completed within 48 hours. And you have the option to redo in the session. You can go out and go back in as long as it's in that 48-hour period. I'll send you an email probably tomorrow with all the links from the session, and the slides and recording will be available on the website in a few days. You can direct questions to the Empower Idaho email if you have any. And once again, I just want to thank you all for attending. And I just dropped our email in the chat if you need it. But once again, thank you, Rebecca, and everyone. Thanks for your great participation.
Yeah, and you guys, this is by 3 times the largest Zoom presentation I've ever done. So it's really exciting to get to reach this much people. Yeah, these are crazy times. I'm in Seattle. You're, who knows where you all are. And we got to talk it out today. So thank you.
Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.